These are just gonna be so freaking useful. Welcome back to the Lost Cause Ranch. That is right, we are back on the LR4 pickup truck. Yes, this is the LR4 that we decided to chop in half to make, I guess, what you would call an Australian style ute. And today is the episode most of you have probably been waiting for. This, in my opinion, is the episode that is gonna make or break whether this looks correct. That is right, we are going to turn our CAD design, yes, the cardboard aided design toolbox that we started this project off with, into something out of aluminum. Now this is likely gonna be the most challenging part of this entire project. Yes, even more challenging than cutting the Land Rover in half. It's gonna be bringing our side toolboxes to life. As you guys remember, before we started making the tray out of actual metal, we used our little laser to give us a proof of concept and made up these cardboard boxes to give us a rough idea on the tray bed concept and how everything would package out and how we can make this look like a true Australian ute. This is going to be a major step in the LR4 truck. This is the last major piece of fabrication that we need to do before we can blow this thing back apart and start finishing everything out. After we get those toolboxes figured out, we can get to welding off the rest of the tray and finishing it out, which also means we can pull the tray off, pull the body back off, and actually attach our rear cap permanently to the LR4, which means after we get these guys built, we are not that far away from having an actual usable LR4 ute. Now, before we can build the side box, we have one thing we have to do underneath. And we went ahead and we're playing around with some dimensions and doing a little measuring. And we came up with a shape something like that. And this cardboard cutout is gonna make up the side profile of our pass-through toolbox. Yes, most of you guys have been pretty on point with saying that we need to use up that space underneath the tray. And you were right. With that space, we're gonna have like that Rivian style pass-through toolbox. So before we build those guys, we need to build this guy. This is gonna be bent out of a piece of the same 1/8 inch aluminum that we used to make the floor on the tray bed. And we went ahead and marked out our dimensions for this, and we are going to cut it in the same fashion that we did with the floor. And that is our circular saw with that plywood blade. We're just gonna zip this off, rip it, get it down to size. So this piece is 33 inches by 42 inches. That 42 inches is the distance between those two 2x2 rails that make up that first ladder frame that we built. And this guy is gonna sit in between those and get welded up to those 2x2s. We're gonna bend this piece into the outer perimeter of this. This would be the top, or essentially the bottom of the floor. This will be the sides, the bottom of the pass-through, and the 33 inches is what the perimeter of this measures. So what we need to do is figure out where this gets bent. And we're gonna bend it at 14. Drop my tape measure, but we're gonna bend it at 14. Let's start from the factory side. We're gonna bend it at 14, and then this bottom piece is 6 inches. Then we should measure out with 13 left, and it does. So let's mark out 14 and 20 all the way down. Then we'll take our T-square and run a line down those measurements. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the capabilities to do a piece of 1/8 inch this wide. Our press brake can do 32 inches, and at 25 tons, it could easily bend the 1/8 inch aluminum at the entire 32 inch width. And we also have a 48 inch finger brake here, but that's really for stuff that's like 16 gauge or half the thickness. It's just not gonna be able to get the job done on this. Good news is Ted has the tool we need. He really saves my butt quite a bit. So we'll run this piece to Ted's and get it bent up over there. Today's gonna be a fun day because we are going to be able to use a variety of tools. Obviously the skill saw, but this isn't gonna be the only thing we're using to cut. It's gonna cut the majority of this aluminum today, but I also went ahead and filled up the water table and got the CNC plasma ready to go. We're gonna draw some stuff up and cut it out on that, and we're gonna get to use our press brake for most of the bending on the boxes. The rest of the boxes fit within its work envelope. See if I have enough cojones. And I think we are good. 110 on the dot, which means we did a 70-degree bend. And our little template fits pretty good inside there. Man, that couldn't have turned out a whole lot better. Just a nice, clean, consistent bend. It's nice having someone like Ted around. We get to make up the gap in each other's tool libraries, I guess. I got stuff here he can use, and he has stuff I can use. We don't have to double up on every single tool. I mean, we both have a lot of tools, but this is a perfect scenario because for the shorter and thicker stuff, we have my press brake, stuff up to 48 inches. We can just run down to Ted's. So much so that I'm probably gonna get rid of our box and pan brake because it's just taking up room. And if we need to bend something like that, his does a nicer job. But like I said, I'm super stoked at how that turned out, and we're gonna get that slid in. But to give you and me a better look at what's going on with this thing, I think it's time to get the floor back off, which means the headache rack roll bar thing has to come back off. You guys know that the majority of projects like this is just taking the thing that you're building off and putting it back on again, taking it off, putting it back on again. You do that about 1,500 times per project, but that's just part of it. Now, we aren't gonna pull the film off on the bed floor for quite some time, but doesn't mean we can't pull it off this one. That looks nice. That wasn't actually that bad. Sometimes that job really sucks. So if we got it right, this should drop in between. So I got an interesting conglomeration rigging this thing up. Clamp here holding this side, couple F clamps, and a broom handle. But that's holding it flush with the top of the square tube so we can get this tacked into place, and we'll blow all that stuff out of the way. And then we can get a look at our little Rivian pass-through and what our thoughts are with that. You know, now that it's in there, it almost looks like one of them urinal troughs that you see in the bathroom. I didn't know in this whole project that we would have a bathroom. I thought the camper would be the only thing we own with an onboard bathroom, but I guess two's better than one, right? But no, you can kind of see what we're going for here and why we had to have this angle on it here. So we're gonna connect our side toolboxes directly to this. And for that connection point, we went ahead and drew up a flange. Looks pretty fancy in the computer here. We'll cut this out on the plasma, but this has some bolt holes drawn into it. We'll put some rib nuts in those, and that flange will be welded to the outside of this, and then we'll have a corresponding bolt pattern and hole on the inside of our toolbox, which will allow us to flip this door down and have access all the way through to the other side. Even Chet likes this idea. We'll be able to fit so many tennis balls in there. But that's gonna help us in several ways, because not only is it going to be our pass-through access for the other side, it will also be the majority of our mounting. We'll have those bolts mounting the back side of the toolbox. Then we'll make two additional brackets on this side at the top to bolt through the top of the toolbox. We'll create some sort of seal for that flange to keep everything weather tight, and that little pass-through looks like it's gonna be mighty useful. Heck, we could even throw like a high lift jack in there. But no, anything long, bag chairs, or anything that we want to keep locked up, we can set them right on through. I'm pretty excited about that. Now, these high-tech CAD models that I made up earlier were more of like a proof of concept not the exact one-to-one that we're gonna use. We need to shrink the width up a little bit because we're gonna have that larger tire, and we also are going to extend them down a hair. And like I was talking, I wanna have a bend on the face to somewhat follow the body coming in. Now we're not going to do a curved piece or anything. It's actually not the look I'm going for. I do want a somewhat of an angular piece. I don't want this all roundy and smooth or anything. I want it to look like we added a flatbed, if that makes sense. Now my order of operations on the toolboxes is going to be starting with the doors. The outer doors are obviously what you're going to see. So I think if we work from these backwards, we're going to get a much better result that fits. So I went ahead and did a bunch more cardboard work and came up with a template for the door. And these doors are going to be the entirety of what you see from the outside of the truck. And they are going to be flanged with a 1-inch lip. And then on the inside of the toolbox, we will have another lip with a bulb seal to make them nice and weather tight. And if we take our piece and fold in our flanges and put it into place, you can see right here we have where the toolbox is going to bend in to follow the body a little bit nicer. Here was our original concept for the rear box, something like yay, and working with a little bit of the visual line now that we have an actual tray. This is our new little proof of concept. I ran out of cardboard. That flange is going to come down and square off, but we went ahead and shrunk the height and extended the length. I shrunk the height on the rear box to match the bend line on the front box. So the bottom of the rear box will be even with where the front box starts to cut in for two reasons. That's going to give it a nice visual continuity. And then we also don't have a rock slider to protect it back here. So I want to keep that toolbox tucked up out of the way, because after all, it is just aluminum, and if we drop it onto a rock, it'll just get frickin' destroyed. So this is gonna sit right like that. We have our spacing on the wheel, even with the front ones. The toolboxes will make up our wheel well, and the tire will be centered in between those. And we are also gonna bend this toolbox lid to contour with the boat tail back to here, and then it is going to end at the inside of the channel. I think that is going to look the part. It's obviously going to look a lot better once it's in aluminum and kind of matches the color scheme, but I think raising this rear toolbox up and extending it back works pretty good. Ignore the exhaust, that's going away. That's not going to exit right there. So we have plenty of room for rocks and whatnot to come up here without messing and buggering that up. We're also leaving ourselves a little bit of clearance to flex the rock slider up without pinching this. So it's time to splay these back out and trace them onto our aluminum. I cut our little cardboard templates by hand, so I didn't draw them up in the computer or anything. So being I did that, I'm just gonna cut our shape out with that circular saw again instead of drawing it up in the computer and putting it on the plasma. I promise you we'll do some plasma stuff later, but this will be just as quick. We're gonna have 2 of these and 2 of those to cut. They'll mirror side to side, just be reverse, if that makes sense. So the outer shape will be the same. We'll just bend them in opposite directions. But this is definitely my type of project today. We have a lot of hopping around to do. It's all got to come together in like different stages. We need certain components done at different points to move on to the next thing. So before we can create that flange and the back side of the box, we need to finish up the lids or the front of the boxes. You saw we ripped out the basic shape with the circular saw, but we just went back and cut out our little relief corners with the portable bandsaw. That thing works pretty slick for stuff like this. You can get a lot of stuff done without all the CNC equipment. If we were doing more than 2 of each of these, I would have drew the file up and cut them out on the plasma. But this is just as quick to rough it out. But if you see, we have a bunch of Sharpie marks laid out on all of them. And those are our bend lines, which means it is time to start to figure out how to go about this on the little press brake. I went ahead and hit a little scrap piece on there to make sure we have everything dialed in, and man, is that frickin' sweet. It's almost too reflective to pick up on camera clearly, but that radius is just perfect. I'm super excited at how this is going to turn out. Now this is going to be a little bit of a learning curve for me. I'm not a master in the bending sheet metal world, especially multiple bends on a single piece. There's always bend orders that are more preferential than others and makes the setup way easier. So there's a good chance that I botched some of this up, but the good news is I'm good at doing things twice. But what I think we're gonna do is get 2 bends done on each of these and then just kind of circle through, because after the first 2 bends on each, we're gonna have to start removing some of the punches and not be able to have the full width. And we'll have to get those sized up correctly to fit inside of the flanges that are already bent. If we didn't do that, we'd have a crash, we'd tweak everything out of the way, and it just would not look nice or fit. So I guess nothing left to it but to do it. This thing's been a pain, but man, now that it's kicking parts out, I'm definitely happy to have it. Now if I laid these out right, all the Sharpie marks should be on the sides that we need to bend it from. But you know, I've been known to screw stuff up before. But this should be pretty straightforward. We just need to start knocking through bends. Now we're not using the back gauge, so I just gotta make sure I line these up by eye pretty good. That's gonna be the trick on this whole deal. Man, that is so slick. Just frickin' money. This thing is pretty awesome once we have it dialed in, and it makes life so much easier than doing this stuff by hand. All right, so the first go round is done on all of them. Now we just need to start setting up the punches on the brake a little different. This will be a tad more time consuming because it's gonna be different for each bend now. So here's our first setup. Now I only have the dies separated in 1-inch increments. And for our next bend, we need 8 5/8 inches of width. I don't suspect this will be a problem. There's probably a more ideal way to do this, but we'll see if it works. After all, it's just aluminum. It should bend pretty easy. And what I'm looking for is to make sure our outer corners have the pressure, so that is right. Dang, that turned out nice. Pleased. I am super pleased. This thing actually might work out. You know what's impressive about this is it's pretty freaking quiet compared to some of the bigger press brakes that I've used. A lot of those kind of scream, make a lot of noise. So we're down to our last 2 90-degree bends. Then we gotta do our little contour kinks. So now we just need to do this center bend. We're gonna burn up a chunk of scrap to make sure we get it dialed in. But that is a 20-degree bend, so we need to put that at 160, I believe. And 0.125, 88, 4-way die, that one. I think that's the right one. Yep. Material type, aluminum. Bend width, We'll do 8 inches, okay. Then we go to run. We'll delete this 90-degree one out of that. Add our 20-degree one. We're starting to get a little library, that's nice. And save that, run program. See how this turns out. 5.9 under. So we just need to correct it in there. This is what I love about this thing. Having used some other like older CNC controlled ones where you're dialing it in by how far the punch is moving down in inches. This thing is doing all the math for us by we just need to measure the degrees, and then it figures everything out and makes the necessary corrections on how far it moves it down, and we're right on the money. That is one good thing I can say about this guy so far is any bend I've done, it's only needed the one correction, then it's came out within like 0.1 degrees. Now the accuracy on this bend is really gonna depend if I got our little relief cut right. I mean, to tell you the truth, it's probably gonna run into it, bugger it all up, but we shall see. Although it would be a bummer if we messed it up on the final bend. But if that happens, that's just part of learning how to do things. But it's going good so far. Heck yeah. We got a little bit of clamping to do on that side to straighten everything out. That is frickin' money. I'm having so much frickin' fun with this thing. This is what I envisioned when I ordered this nearly a year ago. I ordered this in New Jersey in the hotel room right before we started the Rover Ball. So it'll always be pretty memorable. I definitely couldn't make something this nice by hand. Now here's what I was talking about on bend order. I think I may have messed this one up. I think we might have had to leave this one until after this one, but we'll see how it works out. I'm just gonna have to leave a bunch of clearance on this end so that the punch doesn't run into the flange. The best way to learn things is just to go ahead and do it. You kind of just brute force your way through it and you'll figure out what you're doing wrong real quick. At least that's been my theory in life. It's worked mediocre so far. Good news is there isn't a massive amount of bend. This one's only 19 degrees to hit the contour of the bed. I think we're all right. So like I said, we got the CNC plasma hooked up, cleaned out, filled up, and all ready to go. This will be the first part we cut since we moved this guy to the car wash, so hopefully it goes all right. But we're gonna cut the flanges that we drew up for the side of the pass-through. Man, I missed having that thing going too. Now I undersized all these holes. We're gonna drill those out to the correct size for the rib nut. When you're getting to small holes on a plasma, especially something of this caliber, not like a high def one, it doesn't do perfect holes. So if it's critical, like grabbing a rib nut, you're better off drilling it out. But it sure made the rest of that shape much easier than cutting it out by hand. Man, did those guys turn out nice. The bender is spot on. I guess we should say it is spot on when it works, but holy cow. This looks like a manufactured piece if you ask me, but went ahead and welded out all our seams on these to make them one solid piece. Just did our first round of smoothing out. There's gonna be some more work on that after everything's all fitted up. Not exactly sure what I wanna do with these finish wise. I kinda like the mill finish, but I knew that we would kind of booger some of it up, so we'd have to do something either way. We can go back and try and do a brush finish. Otherwise, I think a polished finish might look really cool on that, or we could even just paint them. I'm kind of thinking maybe paint the boxes themselves and polish the lids might be kind of a cool look. But I think that's something we'll determine once we have everything made up, fitted, and on there so we can get an idea of what we're looking at. I always found that when you're building things like this and you move along throughout the project, it will kind of tell you the direction it needs to go. Once we get a visual on it, we can kind of see what would look right. You can try and make all those decisions ahead of time, but I always found that if you let the vehicle kind of tell you what it wants, it usually ends up looking better. And speaking of looking better, let's get this guy pulled out so we can get an eye on him sitting in place. And man, do they look proper on there. Heck yeah. Like I said, we weren't gonna follow body line exactly. I didn't want it to look rolled, but that's exactly what I had in mind. I like the angularity of it. I like that it tucks back in. It doesn't hang out like a big old square. We're sitting at a good height to where the rock slider can flex up if we drop it real hard. And then our little bend line meets up with the bottom of the rear toolbox, and our lid on the rear toolbox ends right at the inner of the C on the channel, and holy cow, they're blingy in the sun. I'm sure you can tell, but I'm very happy with how that came together. It even makes a nice little wheel well. It's just nice when it fits the truck versus just slapping some square toolboxes on it. That was a lot of figuring, but the next part is going to be quite a bit more figuring. We got to do some measuring, and we're going to kind of do this in a roundabout way, probably more work than what we could do. We obviously have the brake to where we can make it out of less pieces, but what I'm going to do is make our box out of 5 separate pieces, 4 sides and then the back panel. And I'm doing that for a couple reasons, but if we were to put this into production, I'd probably make the boxes out of 3 pieces. We would have the top, back, and bottom as one bent piece and then just weld on each side. But instead, I'm gonna make them all separate and weld it together. That's so I can figure out my math much easier. And with the size of the aluminum sheets that we bought, we'd go through a lot of waste if we cut it into larger sections, so it'll just be more efficient on our first go around to make them into separate pieces. And then we're cutting them by hand so we can trim it a little easier. If we're off on our measurements, it'll be a lot easier to correct. So we just need to get a measurement from the inside of this to here, except we'll weld these guys right to our pass-through. So we need to take this measurement minus the 1/8 inch for the flange, and we'll probably factor another 1/8 inch for the gasket, so a 1/4 inch. And we'll start with the top and bottom and back and get that made, and then we can do some cardboard aided design to get the sides. And we're gonna attempt to make our boxes mostly weatherproof. It is my first go around at something like this, so I am gonna say mostly because there's a chance we botch it up. But we went ahead and took a smaller piece of aluminum and did some bending so we could calculate how much we have to account for. If we take our lids for the boxes, the inner box is going to sit something like that. The lid will push right up against this bulb seal. We just need to make sure all our calculations to add for the correct depth for this lip and this lip are on there. And we're going to have this like 1.25 inch flange because that is just what works out with the tooling I have for the brake. It never ceases to amaze me at just how nice a cut that little setup does. But we got the start of the boxes made out here. This is the piece that will make up the back side of the box. Now, if you look at it, it's not very good in the pass-through department, but I don't want to cut that until we have the entire box made up because that is going to locate exactly where the box mounts. So these will be flat, and then we'll have a top piece welded on and a bottom piece welded on. And we'll get that all made up, and then we can measure up for our sides. Our sides are going to be a little more complex because of the bend in the lid. These are essentially straight minus our layout here. We have a bend to make on each side that'll make up the lip. So it's time to go back over to the press brake. Now these are going to be pretty straightforward in comparison to the lids. We don't have a whole lot going on, just 2 bends. We don't have to worry about bend order. We don't have to worry about clearance in the die on anything. It's just going to be 2 90-degree bends. The only thing we can really screw up on this is if I mark my lines out wrong. Now that this guy's actually running and working, I couldn't be more impressed with just how well everything turns out. And for the relative dollar amount, I mean, it is an expensive piece of machinery, but it is many orders of magnitude less than the bigger, I guess, professional ones you would see in shops. It also can do orders of magnitude less, but for around here, this thing should be the ticket. I don't do big things. I'm just a little guy. The only thing I don't like is it is a little slow. If you've ever used actual like real big time press brakes, they are much quicker. Although I think we can speed this up. I think we can almost triple the speed. In the scenario of what we're doing now, this isn't a problem, but if we were ever to run like a production part on it, you'd probably want it to be a little quicker. You wouldn't want to be sitting feeding this, waiting as long as you're waiting. But it's like 70 times faster and 100 times better than I can do by hand. And even much better than I'd be able to do with our little box and pan brake over here. You're gonna hear this every time I use this in the video, but I am just impressed. This is freaking awesome. Now it's gonna be a pretty simple layout on these. We just need to come 90 degrees off, which if I find a square to check, I think we have it at 90 degrees. So yeah, 90 degrees top and bottom, close there. Once it's tacked, we'll tweak it a little bit. We have the fanciest of tools around here. A large chunk of 4-inch round aluminum and a log splitting wedge. I didn't actually know what this was. I asked you guys told me, but this is possibly my favorite layout tool. You just get to lean it up against things. It holds things down tremendously. It's got some decent weight to it. You guys know I'm a big time logger. I usually use Land Rovers though. Bet you guys are jealous of my jig and my fixturing abilities. So it's arts and crafts time. We cut out a chunk of cardboard that matches the bend in the lids. So this should be what we need for the side panel. Minus, we need to add 2 1/4 inches on both of these for the lip, because we'll have to bend that in, slice it. It'll get a little goofy here. We'll have to weld that together, which is fine. I do see something that I messed up, but I think we'll be able to. These 2 bends here should be less than 90 degrees because we're coming in at an angle that isn't 90 degrees. Up here is going to be fine. Down here's not, so maybe we'll adjust that, cut that off, and put the proper one on. But we'll see what we're working with once I get this made. So I gotta go in and file the edges here, but what you saw me cutting out on the bandsaw was a little relief with a reverse, because as we bend this, it's gonna come together on this side and spread apart on that side. So I just kind of eyeballed that, guessed it. It's probably wrong, but we have a welder and we can fill it if it is, but it should get us close. We just need to bend our same lips that we did here, and then we can sandwich that guy on the side. That'll lock everything in, and it'll be easier to get our angle side laid out without everything kind of being floppy. So I got quite a few lines on here. I pointed an arrow to the one I actually need to bend. Hopefully I don't screw this up. Now I could go through and add more bends so I didn't have to restart the program every time for the next bend. You ever just not want to mess with something while it's working? I'm a little timid on this whole brake, so I don't want to mess with it being it's functioning fine. And our math worked out pretty close. That's a fillable gap that'll work. And that is a pretty slick piece. So we made up a couple new pieces for the bottom here. We went with two 70-degree bends. That should match that better, and everything should just be happy. So we have that bottom panel swapped out to the one that is less of an angle. And now you can kind of see the reason for that. We needed that angle to match this angle, which is roughly about 70 degrees. So essentially what we're gonna do is cut a 45 into this one, a 45 into this one, that way they meet and make a nice joint in the corner. And when we have it laid out like this, it is actually relatively easy to lay out. And when we have it set up like this and already bent and good to go with our side panels, it's actually pretty easy to measure and lay out. All we need to do is get this to the correct width and mark this line and do the same up here. And with that line made, all we need to do is take a straight edge from the bottom of the line to the corner and mark that out. And we'll cut this little section out. Up top here, it's going to be a 90-degree line, so we'll just make sure on that and then do the same thing. And we'll cut that. Then trimming our top and bottom is pretty simple. All we need to do is measure the depth of our flange, which works out to 1 3/8. Then we just come in from the edge and measure 1 3/8. And both these will be 90 degrees. So just straight line up and down, and we'll cut that. And being we got some complex stuff going on here, I find the easiest way is just to zip this shit right off. So we have to clamp it in place yet, but you can see we are pretty tight, even, and ready to go on this. If we would have left this at 90, we would have had a ton of hammering and tweaking to do. So this is gonna work out nice. And the box is looking like a box, I guess, like a box, which is what we're going for, so that's good. In place and throw some tacks on it, and then we can kind of tweak it as we go, and then it is off to figuring out the other side and seeing if the whole thing fits. So we got everything clamped up. These top ones are holding the flanges flush with each other. I got one across the width, holding everything square. There's the first time we get to see an idea of the overall look with the lid. It's not going to sit flush until we cut down this corner to miter it with our other side piece. And speaking of our other side piece, we need to make a template for it. And luckily, it is going to be pretty simple to do. This is the template we use to make this side. And all we need to do is set this in here and line up our little peak. Then we can just measure how much further it needs to come out. This one's coming at an angle, so the length needs to be longer overall, but otherwise it's going to be virtually the same as the other piece. You know, I'm actually pretty impressed that that is the leftover aluminum that we have from the entire flatbed project. We did a half decent job guesstimating at how much was going to be used up. You know, now thinking about this, I probably shouldn't have jinxed myself with talking about how little scrap I had left over, because if I botch these last two pieces, or even just one of the last two pieces, I don't have enough to finish. And we're essentially the same process with nibbing the corners off and mitering them. So So we have this top side pretty much fit up. Although you'll notice we're flush at the bottom, but not at the top. This top corner kind of sucked in when we were tacking and welding everything together. So what we're gonna do is weld the bottom here, and then we'll kind of spread this out, tack it together, get everything tacked on this side. Then we'll worry about this side afterwards. I'll just be able to kind of squeeze everything. What I'm doing is going to check the width of it. And there we have it with the lid just sitting on top there, and man, that is cool looking. We probably overcomplicated this a little bit, but I think it's gonna be worth it in the end. These are just about ready to go. We do have to add hinges and latches. We got these nifty little push button lift off latches. I have it set up for 2 hinges on each bottom and 1 latch on each toolbox, kind of center it out. We also have a ton of bulb seal to install. That's going to sit right over that lip. So we'll have to do this in conjunction with the hinges and the latches to set the height. So the lid will lift off probably like an 1/8 inch from sitting on the box itself. But before we do that, we're going to finish off welding the other side. It's amazing how much quicker it goes together on the second one. Well practiced. They are starting to shape up. We have our bulb seal installed on all of them. I went ahead and just kind of started our first go round of smoothing out the welds on the flange. Like I said earlier, I'm just going to smooth these out, and that's mainly so when everything closes down, it's just a clean, consistent gap. The rest of the box, I'm not going to grind the weld down. We're going to leave them full. I want them as strong as possible. There's enough meat on this flange area that that's not going to cause an issue by any means, and we can weld the backside. But on these, I just want to make sure we aren't going to have a box that crack. But getting our seal on here was the step we needed to do before we could drill for our hinges. Thickness of the bulb seal kind of sets our depth. I guess, yeah, I didn't even film that off camera. I went ahead and made our rear boxes. It was pretty much the same exact process as the front ones, just a different shape. I think those are gonna do the part on there. That's gonna be slick. The video is gonna get pretty long already, I think. This has taken far longer than I was ever expecting. Long learning curve on all these like compound bends. It would have been straightforward if I wouldn't have had bends in the middle of the toolboxes, front and rear, but we probably have twice as much time as I was planning on for this. These are probably like $10,000 toolboxes at this point. I mean, not quite, but not far off. Before we get the hinges on, I'm going to cut the hole for our latch. It's gonna be much easier without the lid attached to the box. And our latches just sandwich in there. So we just need the smaller diameter marked out. And then these are like a deep grip latch. We'll have to adjust our little stopper quite a bit back. Those little stoppers will grab on the back side of this flange once we set the depth correctly. And then you just push the button. That little lever flips out of the way. We have a lever that acts as a handle, and you just pull the lid. This part would be much easier if we would have drew it up and cut this whole profile out in the plasma. And then hit it with a zip disc, then hit it with a combination of zip disc and jigsaw. And we wonder how I injure myself. And that should drop right in there. Before we install that, we'll hang our hinges on the bottom. We just measured our desired gap against the box itself, and then we just kind of laid everything out. Looking at this, I probably should have bought some piano hinges or some continuous hinges and cut them down to size, but we're in Dubuque, Iowa, and this type of stuff isn't necessarily super readily available. I couldn't get my hands on stainless continuous hinges in a short fashion, and to be honest, until we got the boxes all made, I didn't know exactly what I needed clearance-wise because it's kind of a goofy setup. So these will do for now. If we have to, I can change them out. It's not the worst deal in the world. We have what we need for depth and whatnot, and then we can just weld the hole shut, smooth them out. No one will ever know, except for me, you, everyone watching this, but no one will ever know. Now on the box side, I'm gonna mark out the hinges in a little less scientific fashion. I'm gonna line up our lid and make sure it looks straight. Then I'm gonna kind of compress it. And take an extra hinge and line it up and then mark the holes out. Now the holes are slightly bigger than the bolts, so we have a tiny bit of adjustment so we can square the lid up after it's all said and done. We'll get it close this time around, but these boxes are gonna come back apart to get finished out. So we aren't gonna get super critical, we just wanna get in the ballpark. Pinch this guy in there. See if we got our depth anywhere near. A little too much. There we go. That is frickin' awesome. Even lines up half decent. You know it is a good thing I don't value my time whatsoever, because at this point these things are literally probably going to be $8,000 toolboxes. Yeah, I'm going to have like 60 hours into these by the time I weld them all out and finish them. But holy cow, if I valued my time, we wouldn't get to make awesome things like this. I am super stoked at how this all turned out. These are just gonna make the whole truck. This is our passenger side rear box. I'm not gonna put the lid on until we sort out our fuel fill situation. That is gonna go inside the box. So we're gonna have some chopping to do in this area, build out a flange, hold that. So that's a future project, but holy cow. That is awesome. Who would have thought? I can even close them again. Now for part of the mounting on the rear toolbox, we're gonna go right into the upright support here and just bolt it through. And we're gonna install some riv nuts into that. It'll be a lot easier to work with toolbox then. We don't have to hold a wrench on the backside. These guys work similar to a pop rivet. Just instead of riveting two pieces together, we're putting a threaded hole in. Might have to get the other one out for these. We're using steel rivets and they take a little bit more force. So for the backside, we'll just use those two rivets and then we'll weld on some mounts for the top to hang everything. I'm gonna have to wait on those for a minute because, as you'll see in a minute here, we're running into some clearance on this mount, which is all right because we're gonna replace this and make our own anyways. So that's not the end of the world right now, but it's just in the way the toolbox hits it. You guys are gonna have to tell me, but I think that just completely changes the entire look of our little tray back LR4. Man, I am in love. I need to slide this one forward a little bit. I just kind of have everything sitting loosely bolted up. I want it to come even with the front of the headache rack. So we'll adjust that some. And if we do that, I think our opening on the wheel well will be perfect. Now, every time I show this thing, someone comments about how there's no clearance and everything. Just for a reminder, this is completely aired out. This will sit quite a bit taller once we have the suspension aired up, but I wanted to build it aired out. This is as high as the wheel will go. So that's the maximum clearance and it's gonna work out pretty well. The toolboxes themselves act as an awesome little wheel well. And we have a solid smooth surface and we dive back in with the body. I'm just freaking happy. Mind you, this is gonna come a little closer so we won't have as big a gap here. Originally, I was gonna make the toolbox kind of meet up with this, or I was thinking maybe a filler panel, but what I think I'm gonna do is before we bodywork this out, I'm gonna come down and square this corner off with fiberglass and just make it go down. For my purposes, there's no need for that to kick in like that. So we're gonna get rid of it, and I think that'll make the truck look much better, but man, I am freaking stoked. Just slick as all get out. These are just gonna be so freaking useful. The rear boxes are actually surprisingly roomy for how small they are. We'll be able to throw some ratchet straps, maybe some safety shackles, maybe a bubba rope or something like that in there. And just click it back shut. They're lockable. Like I said before, I need a clearance, that inner mount, and then this will tuck back flush, much like the front box. I just can't get enough of it. Oh, that is so good looking. And with the mufflers gone, and we're gonna clean up some of this rear stuff, it's just gonna frickin' work perfect. And a lot of you guys were questioning the boat tail in the rear. I think this kind of fills it out and makes it look right, or at least that's what I was going for. But you guys just let me know what you think about this. We're kind of out of time today, so we'll show you how we address the pass-through on the next video. And speaking of the next video on the LR4, that is going to be addressing the engine issue. Yes, this whole project started because I cooked the freaking engine. We have a solution for that figured out. So more than likely in the next video, we'll show you how we mounted everything. We'll get the other side mounted and we will blow this thing back apart. We'll get the body off, we'll get the flatbed off, because the fabrication is pretty much done. We can weld that out separately, but this thing's pretty useless if it doesn't have the ability to drive. So we'll get back on that end of it. That'll probably be in 2 weeks. I have another Land Rover to deal with on next week's video. Appreciate you guys watching, appreciate you subscribing, and we will catch you next week. It was a freaking boatload of work. I was a little discouraged, but man, was it worth it. I just freaking love it. It's gonna be nice to have that go right on through there.